The next 18 hours passed in a strange mixture of tension and unexpected cooperation. Captain Zixthara found herself in the surreal position of coordinating with beings she had been taught to fear since childhood. Admiral Chen had been true to her word. The human fleet had taken defensive positions around Sanctuary Station, but they had made no aggressive moves toward the station itself. What shocked the captain most was how professional the humans were. When Admiral Chen had requested permission to send technical advisors to help upgrade the station's defenses, Zixthara had expected armed soldiers to board her vessel. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a human engineer who spoke softly and moved with careful, deliberate motions that seemed designed to avoid startling the alien crew. "Your energy barrier generators are impressive," Dr. Rodriguez had said as she examined the station's defensive systems. "Very elegant design, but they're configured for deflecting energy weapons. The Veltar use bioorganic projectiles that will pass right through energy fields." Working alongside Lieutenant Kalanara and the station's engineering team, the human doctor had spent hours reconfiguring the barrier generators to create a hybrid defense system. Her knowledge of both Federation and human technologies was startling, and her patience with the alien crew's nervousness was unexpected. "Dr. Rodriguez," Lieutenant Kalanara had asked hesitantly during one of their work sessions, "why do humans build such frightening ships? The designs are so aggressive." The human had paused in her work and looked thoughtful. That's a good question. I suppose it's because we learned early that the universe isn't always a friendly place. Our ships look dangerous because they need to be dangerous when the situation calls for it. But looking dangerous and being dangerous to innocent people are two very different things. Now, as Captain Zixthara stood on her bridge watching the long-range sensors, she was beginning to understand what Dr. Rodriguez had meant. The human fleet's positioning around the station wasn't random or merely defensive. It was a carefully orchestrated formation that created overlapping fields of fire while also providing maximum protection for the station's civilian areas. "Captain," Dr. Velther called from his science station, his voice tight with fear, "I'm detecting massive bioenergy signatures approaching the system. The Veltar swarm has arrived." The main viewscreen activated, showing the outer edge of the star system. At first there was nothing visible except stars and empty space. Then, like a disease spreading across healthy tissue, dark shapes began to emerge from the void. The Veltar ships were unlike anything built by any known civilization. They looked grown rather than constructed, with organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with an internal rhythm like a heartbeat. "My gods," Commander Hickstall whispered. "There are so many of them." The sensor readings confirmed their worst fears. 300 Veltar bioships, ranging from small fighter analogs to massive hive carriers that dwarfed even the largest Federation dreadnoughts. They moved through space like a living tide, their formation flowing and shifting with predatory intelligence. "Captain," Lieutenant Kalanara reported, "Admiral Chun is hailing us, on screen." The human admiral appeared on the view screen, but she was no longer sitting calmly in her command chair. She stood at what appeared to be a tactical display, her uniform now supplemented with additional equipment that made her look even more formidable. Behind her, the human bridge was a hive of controlled activity. "Captain Zixthara," Admiral Chun said without preamble, "we're about to begin combat operations. I want you to route your tactical sensors through our combat network so you can see what we're doing. Your people deserve to understand what's happening." "Why?" Captain Zixthara asked, genuinely confused. "Why do you want us to watch?" For the first time since their initial contact, Admiral Chun smiled. It was a fierce expression that revealed those predatory teeth, but somehow it didn't seem threatening. It seemed protective. Because after today, the galaxy is going to have a lot of questions about humans and our intentions. You and your crew are going to be witnesses to something that will change how everyone sees us. The tactical link established itself, and suddenly the bridge of Sanctuary Station was filled with data streams from the human fleet. Captain Zixthara gasped as she realized she was seeing through the sensors of 12 different warships simultaneously. Getting a complete picture of the developing battle, the Veltar swarm had spread out into an attack formation, their bioships moving with a fluid coordination that spoke of hive mind intelligence. But as they approached the inner system, something unexpected happened. The human fleet didn't charge forward to meet them. Instead, they began to move in what looked like a retreat. Are they running? Commander Hickstal asked in disbelief. No, Dr. Velther said, studying the tactical displays with growing amazement. Look at the positioning. They're not retreating, they're drawing the swarm into a specific area of space. He was right. As the Veltar ships pursued what they thought was a fleeing enemy, the human fleet led them into the gravitational shadow of the system's largest moon. It seemed like a tactical mistake. The moon's gravity well would limit maneuverability for both sides. Admiral Chun, Captain Zixthara called out, your ships are entering a gravity well. You're limiting your own movement options. That's the idea, Admiral Chun replied calmly. Watch and learn. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for generations to come. As the Veltar swarm closed in for what they thought would be an easy kill, the human fleet executed a maneuver that defied everything the Federation knew about space combat tactics. Instead of turning to fight, the human ships dove deeper into the moon's gravity well, accelerating at rates that should have been impossible. But they weren't just moving, they were using the moon's gravity as a weapon. At precisely calculated moments, each human ship released volleys of kinetic projectiles that used the gravitational field to accelerate to devastating velocities. The effect was like watching a predator spring a perfectly planned trap. The Veltar bioships, designed for fighting in open space, suddenly found themselves caught in a killing field where every piece of debris, every fragment of destroyed ship, was accelerated by gravity into a secondary weapon, but the humans weren't finished. As the swarm reeled from the unexpected assault, Admiral Chun's fleet executed their second phase. The ships broke into 3-ship formations and began what Dr. Velther recognized as pack-hunting tactics. Incredible, he whispered, watching the displays. They're using predatory group behavior patterns but adapted for space combat. Each formation covers the other's weak spots while maximizing their collective firepower. The human weapons were unlike anything in the Federation arsenal. Instead of the clean energy beams preferred by civilized species, they used a mixture of technologies that seemed designed to maximize both destruction and psychological impact. Railguns hurled solid projectiles at relativistic speeds. Plasma cannons created expanding clouds of superheated gas that cooked bioships from the inside out. And then there were the nuclear torpedoes. Captain Zixthara had heard stories about human nuclear weapons, but seeing them in action was something else entirely. When the first torpedo detonated in the middle of a cluster of Veltar fighters, the explosion created a miniature star that briefly outshone the system's actual sun. The shockwave that followed tore apart dozens of bioships and sent the survivors tumbling helplessly through space. How can they control such destructive forces? Lieutenant Kalanara asked in awe. Those weapons could destroy planets. That's exactly why they can control them, Dr. Velther realized. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They learned to harness forces that would terrify other species because they had to. It was adapt or die. The battle raged for 3 hours, and gradually the tactical picture became clear. The Veltar swarm, despite their overwhelming numbers, were being systematically dismantled. The humans fought with a combination of tactical brilliance and sheer ferocity that left even the hive-minded aliens struggling to adapt. Admiral Chion's voice cut through the tactical chatter. All ships, priority target identified. Massive biosignature bearing 27 Mark V. That's their queen ship. On the sensors, a new contact appeared that dwarfed everything else on the battlefield. The Veltar queen ship was a living mountain, a bioconstruct the size of a small moon that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. It began launching swarms of smaller vessels while charging some kind of massive bioweapon that made the space around it writhe with dark energy. "That weapon," Dr. Velther said, his voice filled with horror, "if they fire that at the station, our barriers won't even slow it down. It'll dissolve our hull like acid." "Admiral," Captain Zixthara called out, "that weapon signature, our analysis suggests it's some kind of molecular disruptor. If they target the station, they won't get the chance," Admiral Chun replied with cold determination. "All ships execute Omega Protocol." What followed would become known as the most audacious military maneuver in recorded galactic history. The 12 human ships, already battered from hours of combat, formed a spearhead formation and dove directly toward the Queen ship. They accelerated past SA. The alarm klaxons screamed through the corridors of Sanctuary Station like the dying wails of a wounded beast. Captain Zixthara pressed all 4 of her hands against the cool metal of the observation deck's railing, her purple skin shifting to a deeper shade of violet as stress hormones flooded her system. Through the reinforced viewing port she could see them approaching, 12 massive ships, dark as the void between stars, their hulls scarred and battle-worn. They moved with the predatory grace of apex hunters, cutting through space with engines that glowed an ominous red. These weren't the sleek, elegant vessels of the Galactic Federation. These were warships built by Deathworlders. "Status report," Zixthara commanded, though her voice carried none of its usual authority. Fear had a way of stealing strength from even the most experienced commanders. Lieutenant Kellanara, her communications officer, looked up from his station with all 3 of his eyes wide with terror. "Captain, they're not responding to our hails. Long-range sensors confirm the fleet composition. 12 heavy cruisers, all of human design. They're armed with kinetic weapons, plasma cannons, and—" He paused, his translator struggling with the unfamiliar terms. "Something called nuclear torpedoes." A collective shudder ran through the bridge crew. Everyone in the galaxy had heard the stories about humans and their weapons. While civilized species had long ago abandoned such primitive and destructive armaments in favor of clean energy weapons, humans still clung to their barbaric tools of war. They were the only species known to weaponize antimatter, to turn the very building blocks of creation into instruments of destruction. "Distance to the station?" Zixthara asked, though she dreaded the answer. 2 standard hours at their current velocity, Captain." Sanctuary Station was home to over 2 million beings from 47 different species. It served as a neutral trading post and refugee center, positioned at the edge of Federation space where those fleeing war, persecution, or economic hardship could find safety. The station's defenses were minimal by design. After all, who would attack a humanitarian outpost? "Have we received any response from Federation Command?" Zixthara hoped against hope that help was coming. "Negative, Captain. The nearest Federation fleet is 6 days away. We're on our own." Dr. Velther, the station's chief xenobiologist, cleared his throat nervously. As one of the galaxy's leading experts on Deathworld species, his presence on the bridge had been requested the moment the human ships were detected. "Captain, if I may," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Humans are unlike any species we've encountered. Their homeworld, Earth, is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld. To put that in perspective, the most dangerous world any other Federation species originated from is Class 4. He activated a holographic display that showed Earth in all its terrifying glory. "Look at this planet. 90% of its surface is covered in either corrosive saltwater oceans or unstable landmasses that shift and buckle without warning. The atmosphere contains toxins that would kill most species within minutes. The weather patterns are chaotic and destructive, with electrical storms that could power small cities and temperature, variations that would flash freeze Altarian. Blood, the bridge crew watched in horrified fascination as the display showed footage of Earth's natural disasters. Hurricanes that could swallow entire continents, earthquakes that split the ground apart, volcanic eruptions that blotted out the sky. But that's not even the worst part," Dr. Velther continued. "The life forms on this world are predatory beyond imagination. Everything eats everything else in an endless cycle of violence? And humans. Humans evolved to be the apex predators of this nightmare world. They can run for hours without stopping, track prey across vast distances, and their bodies are designed to endure punishment that would kill any rational being. He brought up another display showing human anatomy. Look at these structures. Dense bone composition that can withstand tremendous impact. Redundant organ systems that allow them to function even when severely damaged. And their brains are hardwired for aggression, pattern recognition, and tactical thinking. They don't just fight to survive, they fight to win. Commander Hickstall, the station's security chief, spoke up from his position near the tactical display. Dr. Velther, what are their likely intentions? Are they here to conquer? To raid our supplies? The xenobiologist wrung his hands nervously. That's just it, Commander. Human behavior is almost impossible to predict. They're capable of incredible acts of both creation and destruction. They've been known to help stranded travelers, but they've also been known to... Well, there are stories of human pirates who don't just steal cargo. They take prisoners for sport? Sport? Captain Zixthara's voice was barely a whisper. Humans have a concept called hunting for pleasure on their world. They would track and kill other creatures not for food or survival, but for entertainment. Some xenanthropologists believe this behavior extends to their interactions with other sapient species. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the life support systems and the distant thrum of the station's rotation. Through the viewing port, the human ships continued their approach, growing larger and more menacing by the minute. "Captain," Lieutenant Kellanara called out, his voice pitched high with panic. "I'm detecting energy signatures from the lead vessel. They're charging their weapon systems." "All hands, this is the captain," Zixthara announced over the station-wide comm system. "We have incoming hostile vessels. All civilians are to report to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Security teams, prepare for possible boarding action." As the announcement echoed through the station's corridors, 2 million beings began to move with the desperate urgency of prey animals sensing a predator. Families clutched their younglings close as they hurried toward the reinforced sections of the station. Merchants abandoned their stalls, leaving behind fortunes in exotic goods. The normally bustling promenades and marketplaces emptied as beings of every conceivable shape and size sought whatever safety the station's emergency protocols could provide. In the refugee quarters, where thousands of beings who had already fled one disaster now faced another, the panic was even more intense. These were individuals who had seen war, persecution, and loss. They knew what it meant when Deathworlders came calling. Captain Zixthara watched the chaos unfold on the internal monitors and felt a crushing weight of responsibility. These people had come to Sanctuary Station because it was supposed to be safe. They trusted her to protect them, and now she was about to fail them all. "Captain," Commander Hickstall reported grimly, "our defensive systems are online, but they won't hold against that kind of firepower for more than a few minutes. Our energy barriers might stop a few shots, but those kinetic weapons they're carrying will punch right through our hull." "What about evacuation?" "Not enough time, and not enough ships. We have maybe 300 small craft in the docking bays, but we'd need 3 days to evacuate everyone safely." Dr. Velther was studying his scanner readings with growing alarm. "Captain, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the human vessels. These aren't standard Federation technologies. Some of these readings, I don't even have classifications for them. Unknown weapons?" Commander Hickstall asked. "Possibly. Or possibly something worse. Humans are known to experiment with technologies that other species consider too dangerous or unethical to develop. There are rumors about biological weapons, mind control devices, even something called planet crackers. The human fleet was close enough now that individual details could be made out on their hull surfaces. Each ship bore scars from countless battles, burn marks from energy weapons, impact craters from kinetic strikes, and strange symbols that Dr. Velther identified as human writing. The lead vessel was particularly intimidating. its hull painted in a dark red that looked disturbingly like dried blood. "Captain," Lieutenant Kellanara called out. "The lead vessel is hailing us." "On screen," Zixthara ordered. Though every instinct in her body screamed at her to run and hide, the view screen flickered to life. And for the first time, the bridge crew got their first look at a living human. The figure that appeared before them was exactly what their worst nightmares had conjured. Tall and bipedal, with pale skin that looked almost corpse-like under the harsh lighting of their bridge. Its eyes were small and set forward in its skull like those of a predator, and when it spoke they could see sharp white teeth, but it was the human's clothing that truly terrified them. It wore what appeared to be some kind of military uniform, dark and utilitarian, with metal insignia that caught the light like the fangs of some great beast. This was clearly a warrior, a killer trained in the arts of war and destruction. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet," the human said, its voice surprisingly soft but carrying an undertone of absolute authority. "We are requesting permission to dock at your station." Captain Zixthara found herself unable to speak. This was it. The moment every spacer dreaded. Contact with Deathworlders. And not just any Deathworlders, but humans, the most dangerous species in known space. We are a peaceful station," she finally managed to stammer. "We have no military assets, no strategic value. We're just a refugee center and trading pause." 3 days after the Battle of Sanctuary Station, Captain Zixthara stood in the observation lounge watching the systematic destruction of Veltar biomatter. The human ships that had survived the battle were methodically hunting down every fragment of organic material from the destroyed swarm, ensuring that nothing remained that could regenerate into new threats. It was thorough work. The kind of attention to detail that spoke of hard-won experience. Dr. Velther had explained that the Veltar could regrow entire fleets from even small organic fragments if given enough time and resources. The humans clearly understood this threat better than any Federation military analyst. "Captain," Lieutenant Kellanara approached with a datapad in his hands. "The final casualty reports from the evacuation shelters. Somehow, despite 3 days of alerts and the battle itself, we lost no civilian lives. Minor injuries only, mostly from the rush to reach emergency stations." Zixthara nodded, but her attention remained focused on the human ships outside. 11 vessels where there had once been 12. The loss of Admiral Chen and her crew weighed heavily on her thoughts, especially since their sacrifice had been made to protect beings they had never met before that day. "Any word from the search and rescue operations?" she asked. "The humans are still combing through the debris field, but ... Kellanara hesitated. "Captain, the explosion that destroyed Admiral Chun's ship was massive. The odds of finding survivors after 3 days in space are essentially zero." A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Dr. Rodriguez appeared on the nearest communication panel, and Zixthara was surprised to see the human doctor smiling broadly. "Captain, I have news I think you'll want to hear. Could you come to Docking Bay 7? There's something you need to see." 20 minutes later, Captain Zixthara stood in the airlock of Docking Bay 7, watching as a heavily modified human shuttle completed its approach. The craft looked like it had been through a war zone, its hull blackened and scarred. Several sections clearly replaced with salvaged materials. "That's not one of our standard shuttles," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "We found it this morning, broadcasting a weak emergency beacon from the outer system. It was running on backup power and had maybe 6 hours of life support remaining." As the shuttle's airlock cycled open, Captain Zixthara held her breath. The first figure to emerge was Admiral Chun herself, supported by 2 of her crew members. She was clearly injured, with one arm in an improvised sling and visible fatigue in her movements. But she was alive. "Admiral," Zixthara found herself rushing forward before she could stop herself. "We thought you were dead." "Your ship exploded." Chun managed a weak smile. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. When we realized the ship was going critical, my engineering team managed to get one of our armored shuttles operational. We barely made it to minimum safe distance before the Indomitable went up. As more crew members emerged from the shuttle, Dr. Rodriguez provided medical assistance while explaining what they had discovered. 17 survivors out of a crew of 63? They've been drifting for 3 days on minimal power, rationing air and water. By all rights, they should have died hours ago. How did they survive so long? Zixthara asked. They went into voluntary hypothermia. Dr. Velther had arrived in the docking bay and was scanning the human survivors with obvious fascination. Deliberately lowered their body temperature and metabolic rate to extend their consumables. It's an adaptation from their homeworld. Humans can survive in conditions that would kill most species. Admiral Chun overheard this and chuckled weakly. Dr. Velther, right? The xenobiologist who gave our reputation such a glowing review. Don't worry, we're not nearly as scary as you made us sound. The Altarian doctor's skin shifted to an embarrassed shade of blue. Admiral, I owe you and your species an apology. My assessment was based on incomplete data, and I admit prejudice. I portrayed humans as predatory monsters when I should have recognized you for what you truly are, which is protectors, guardians, the sheepdog species the galaxy never knew it needed. Over the following week, Sanctuary Station became an unexpected hub of diplomatic activity. Word of the battle had spread throughout Federation space, and representatives from dozens of worlds had arrived to meet with the human survivors and learn more about the species that had sacrificed so much to protect. Strangers. Captain Zixthara found herself in the unique position of hosting negotiations that would reshape galactic politics. The main conference room had been modified to accommodate representatives from 47 different species, all eager to understand more about humanity. The question before us, announced Ambassador Veldorian of the Altarian Council, is how we proceed. The human fleet saved not just Sanctuary Station but potentially every world in this sector. The Veltar swarm was heading directly toward the core worlds. Admiral Chun, now recovered enough to participate in the discussions despite her injuries, addressed the gathered representatives. With respect, Ambassador, I don't think you understand the scope of the threat we're facing. The swarm fleet you encountered here was just one tendril of a much larger organism. Our intelligence suggests there are at least 12 more fleets like this one. Possibly more. The announcement sent waves of fear through the assembled delegates. Dr. Velther, now serving as humanity's unofficial advocate, activated a holographic display showing the known extent of Veltar expansion. Admiral Chun is correct, he said. The swarm has been expanding for decades, consuming entire civilizations. Traditional Federation tactics have proven ineffective against them. But human tactics. He gestured toward the battle recordings. Human tactics suggest a path to victory. Representative Taller of the Centaurian Trade Federation leaned forward in her hover chair. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Velther? A formal alliance, the doctor replied. Not just with Admiral Chen's fleet, but with the entire human government. Integration of human military doctrine with Federation resources. Combined fleet operations using human tactical knowledge and Federation logistics. The debate that followed was intense. Some representatives worried about the implications of allying with a species known for their aggressive nature. Others argued that the threat posed by the Veltar swarm left them with little choice. It was Captain Zixthara who provided the deciding argument. She stood slowly, looking around at the assembled delegates, most of whom had never been closer to actual combat than a strategic planning session. 3 weeks ago, she began, I was terrified of humans. I had been taught that they were dangerous predators who would kill for pleasure. When their fleet arrived here, I expected the worst. I prepared for conquest, enslavement, perhaps even genocide. She activated a recording of the battle, showing the moment when Admiral Chen's ship executed its final attack on the Queen ship. Instead, I watched a human sacrifice herself and her crew to protect 2 million beings she had never met. I watched a species that could have taken anything they wanted from us choose instead to give everything they had to keep us safe. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Captain Zixthara continued, her voice growing stronger with conviction. The question isn't whether humans are dangerous. Of course they are. The question is what they choose to do with that danger. And they choose to stand between us and the things that would destroy us. They choose to be our guardians. Representative Kathara of the Vegan Mining Consortium, who had been one of the strongest opponents of the Alliance, spoke up. But can we trust them? How do we know they won't turn on us once the Valtar threat is eliminated? Admiral Chun stood to respond, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated her injuries. Representative Kathara, I understand your concern. My species has a saying, trust but verify. I propose a solution that addresses both our needs. She activated her own display, showing what appeared to be a military organizational chart. The Human Defense Force is prepared to offer the Federation something unprecedented, complete integration. Not just alliance, but actual combined command structures. Human officers serving under alien commanders, alien officers commanding human ships. Shared technology, shared intelligence, shared responsibility. You would put human warships under alien command? Ambassador Valdorian asked in disbelief. If those commanders prove competent and trustworthy, absolutely. We're not interested in conquest or domination. We're interested in results. If an Altarian admiral can keep my people alive and accomplish the mission, I'll follow her orders without question. The negotiations continued for 3 more days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The threat posed by the Veltar swarm was simply too great for any other considerations to take precedence. The Federation alliance with humanity was signed in the same conference room where Captain Zixthara had once feared for her life. 6 months later, Captain Zixthara stood on the bridge of the FSS Unity, the first joint human Federation vessel ever constructed. Half of her crew was human, half from various Federation species, and all of them worked together with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, her human tactical officer, reported from his station. We're receiving a distress call from the Kepler colony. Veltar biosignatures detected in